Over the next 5 minutes, we'll briefly talk about the risk mindset, how to manage complex risk, and go through a few examples of managing risk from Sri Lanka. It is often thought that risk can be controlled through compliance, proper planning, and processes such as approvals. This treats risk as though it is simple, like a machine where we know all the parts and what they will do. In an emergency, risk is not simple, and the more complicated the context, the more challenging risk management becomes. There are many different parts of communities, politics, weather patterns, and more that work together to make risks look a little more like this. In an emergency, where context is quickly changing, risk becomes far more difficult to judge, and we then see risk as fluid, unable to be controlled, and only able to be managed. Compliance then supports basic accountability, and to manage risk, we need a risk mindset. A risk mindset is one that understands managing risk is more than contingency planning and risk management documents. It is about actively filtering those plans and discussions on risk, deciding what the main risks are, and managing those risks throughout your work every day. A risk mindset knows that to manage risk we must be ready to change as things don't go to plan. Managing risk must be part of everyday work. Leaders must be given space to work and rewarded for appropriate risk-taking. And leaders need courage and good communication to ensure they do not fall back on compliance and blame games. So how exactly do we do this? Let's look at some principles of managing risk through examples from Sri Lanka.
During the tsunami response, one of the biggest risks, both programmatically and financially, was the huge shelter program for housing reconstruction across Sri Lanka. World Vision had limited capacity to implement shelter programs, and the complexity of diverse cultures, authorities, and environments increased the already high programmatic risk. We made the choice to split the program into small contracts to over 60 contractors, so that if one contractor underperformed, then it wouldn't affect the entire program. Each contractor had a fairly small scope of work, between 20 to 60 houses, so that site supervision was manageable and financial outlay to each contractor was minimised. In the conflict-affected areas where contractors couldn't work, we used community-based construction with staff engineers managing work. Here a huge risk was decoupled into very small risks, each which could have challenges and still allow the other parts of the program to succeed. Through managing the risk appropriately, World Vision was able to build more houses than any other organisation in the conflict-affected areas.
During the tsunami response, we had a liaison officer for the northern areas whose sole job was to keep communication lines open internally and externally with the government, other agencies, and the clusters. She would work closely with the technical advisors and the project managers to communicate key programmatic points to a variety of actors. A number of times, there were minor confusions which would have turned into large mistakes, such as possible duplication with other agencies and serious miscommunication to government and rebel groups. The liaison officer was extremely successful in keeping communication lines open, spotting and solving problems before they arose. She also gained management support to speaking honestly with staff about what changes were needed. Furthermore, we built trust with other organizations and government, which ultimately led to easier negotiations and good outcomes, such as World Vision being one of the agencies to receive the most land from local authorities to build houses.
The security context in Sri Lanka moved from calm to anarchy and disorder quickly and without notice because of conflict and political tensions. Our team had to plan around these challenges, discussing worst-case scenarios for our office and programs. We managed according to this risk as part of everyday work. One example of this is a housing program we ran in the Potpati Township, where we decided to distribute all shelter materials to beneficiaries as they were not safe in our warehouse due to looting and artillery attack. We then evacuated all field staff from these areas. Beneficiaries continued their own construction, and we returned months later to finalize the housing construction. We completed all 151 houses planned in Potpati. Planning for the worst showed clear advantage over and over again when our office was ransacked and at times of our warehouse destroyed. With a culture of managing risk in the office, we were able to be flexible and improvise to ultimately complete the program while at the same time ensuring the safety of our staff.
So what have we learned? In an emergency, risk cannot be controlled, it must be managed. Compliance is for basic accountability. To manage risk, we need a risk mindset, and risk must be managed through principles including decoupling risk, planning for the worst, and keeping communication lines open.